From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you. Here's what's coming up. K-State's Dan O'Brien looks ahead to the USDA's prospective plantings and grain stocks reports to be released this morning as part of his weekly commentary on the grain market trends. K-State's Ignacio Ciampitti then joins Britton Rucker to invite you Kansas farmers to partner with K-State in on-farm crop production research this growing season. This program generates field-level information that can greatly benefit you producers. Further ahead, K-State's Mykel Taylor previews a special webinar on Kansas agricultural land values K-State will host in early May. Also, K-State's Mary Knapp awaits to talk Kansas agricultural weather with us. All that right here on this Agriculture Today.
Hamburgers, roast, ribs, steak, or whatever you prefer. Beef, it's what's for dinner. Kansas cattle farmers produce 7.5 million head of cattle per year. It takes about 7 tablespoons of peanut butter to get the same amount of protein in 1 serving of lean beef. Support your local Kansas farmers and ranchers. Eat beef. This message was brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
Welcome to our Friday edition of Agriculture Today here on the K-State Radio Network. Within the hour, the U.S. Department of Agriculture will post more important numbers for the grain markets to consider, and we'll talk about what's likely to come of those reports now with Dan O'Brien. During his weekly grain market segment, he is a grain market economist with K-State Research and Extension. Well, let's start with the USDA's Prospective Plantings Report. That's coming out later this morning, Dan. The market's eager to digest what that has to say, but there is a caveat. These will be numbers as of March the 1st, and a whole lot has happened from then to now.
That's correct, and I think it's good to keep in mind that the period we've come through, again, January, February, early March, basically was, at least up until the excessive moisture and floods hit, was pretty docile. Not a lot going on. As some talk about trade issues that would affect the markets up and down some, but even that's kind of been seemingly sort of mitigated with the markets not responding to them so much. But now here with this report coming up, we're entering the season where each one of these reports, weather forecasts, projections from independents as well as from USDA sources are all going to affect the market psyche, the market opinion, the narrative, I guess you'd call it, with regard to where prices are going. And again, with all that's been happening of late, we really have not seen any big jumps at all. Again, the first round of high water flooding happened, continues to move downstream literally, and markets haven't moved around very much. And the anticipation of more rainfall to come from the upper Midwest, coming down Mississippi, that it's causing navigation issues along rivers. So the point is that here now we have this planting report on the one hand and the stocks report on the other. Stocks report to give a picture of usage that we've had. And just as you mentioned, Eric, that we'll see these stocks numbers. They were measured as of, near the 1st of March at the end of the D-Feb quarter. And a lot has happened to those stocks in different parts of the country.
And not in a good way.
And not in a good way. And we've had repeated reports of people talking about how flood-damaged grain and storage and the pictures and the amount of evidence that we've had some sizable amount of grain affected are there to be seen. So some proportion of this grain that we'll have a report on in the stocks report that comes out, is now unusable. The other side of that is also there's been damage to the demand side from those floods. Again, we've seen ethanol industry estimates of 10-13% of ethanol plant capacity at least temporarily affected by that. And I think you and I have talked about that some. I would add in that in looking at ethanol stocks, not of grain at the plants, but of what they produce, it's at record highs. So there's some margin to absorb some slowdown in that. all that said, we'll have a stocks report, we'll have a projection of usage out of all that, and frankly, the projection of usage to this point, which measured what happened from December through February, may be of more value because it'll show the differential up to that point than the actual stocks number on March 1st, because again, that number now has been whittled down by some amount. So usage numbers still be of great value, but the quantity going forward, that's what we'll wonder about. And looking at the acreage figure, again, the trade's coming out, projecting about 91.3 million acres of corn to be planted and about 86.2 million acres of soybeans. The 91.2 million acres of corn would be up about 2 million acres from last year. The soybean number would be down about 3 million acres. And there's some mixing back and forth of how wheat would come. Generally, wheat projected to be down or thought to be down by the trade coming into this report by about 1.1 million acres. Grain sorghum was about 5.7 million acres, projected to be about 5.7. It's really the grain sorghum numbers and the corn numbers are sort of heading upward in the same direction. I would add in that, again, Eric, we've been watching the soybean to corn price ratio week by week all the way through the winter. And actually that now, if that's any indicator of the direction of acreage numbers, that soybean versus corn price for new crop 2019 has been eroding a little bit. It was about 2.4, heading towards 2.5 for a while. Now it's been heading the other way towards about 2.3 and been softening moderately as we go along here. So we'll see what happens, I guess, but that's some indicator, I think, of less optimism as to where soybeans might go. And again, I think this whole market landscape is affected by a wait and see and in some cases somewhat pessimistic attitude towards trade negotiations between the U.S. and China working out positively. I'm not saying that it is exactly what's going to happen, but the market seems to not be very enthusiastic about the positive possibilities. And we say that, and here we've just received a report within this week of China stepping in and buying a good amount of corn, corn and or soybeans in the last week or so. So we get those reports that that's happening, but we still don't see a lot of movement in the markets underneath. So I guess I go back to our original thought that first, this planting report will be important. After that, we are really watching the weather to see when field work can resume. And we do start here shortly in April with major 18-state crop progress reports. And we'll see in a quantified manner what the progress is in doing field work and starting to get crops planted, et cetera. And if soils remain wet and we see slow planting, then I think you'll have more attention on that in the market. Right now, it sure seems like the corn market and these other markets are kind of discounting the weather risks for this year. Again, I think their thoughts are that call me again on May 1st, and we'll see where you're really at. And then really give me a call if nothing has happened by May 15th. Then I'll start to get really worried. But right now, they must be thinking that it's just too early to be very panicky about it.
And that may be so, Dan, but clarity on all of this, the acreage to be planted, is going to be so extraordinarily slow in coming. And again, we're talking about it here, the broadly saturated soils throughout the Corn Belt region, the Western Corn Belt included, obviously. There at some point has to be a trigger that says this is out of the norm, and prices have to reflect that.
The only place, according to NASA satellite data in the United States in the Corn Belt, that's not dealing with, as they define, a wetness percentile of at least 70, 80, or 90%, is surprisingly now the interior of Missouri, and I guess we'd call it east central Illinois, northern Indiana. Michigan's sort of drying out, but other than that, you're looking at extremely wet conditions through almost all of Iowa, well, of course, Nebraska, western Kansas, southern Wisconsin, a good chunk of South Dakota, North Dakota, onto Montana, southwest two-thirds of Illinois, southern Indiana. So moist on top, moist in the root zone, according to these satellite evaluations and forecasts for the month of April, again, in the Western Corn Belt, to be really pretty wet, running from Texas up to southern North Dakota and all the way from eastern Colorado to basically the western edge of Iowa, you've got wet conditions forecast for the month of April. So, again, it's going to be an interesting several weeks. The market obviously has not responded to any real weather concerns yet. We see vastly different prices than Deese corn at $3.98 and November beans at $9.23 3/4, and actually in July, Kansas City wheat at $4.46. Again, not a lot of response yet. I don't want to just overbeat that drum,
right?
But if we have an issue that would change market prices, right now, for what we can foresee, it'd be planting. Well, there's a lot riding in terms of marketing opportunities for U.S. crop producers this year, or for any of the spring-planted crops, on just how the uncertainty and risks of this planting season play out. And if the crop gets in with no problem, then, gosh, with all the moisture we have, we're in a risk management mode probably in the markets.
And as you say, there's been scant little inspiration on the export side, here and there news about potential China sales, but until more concrete evidence of product movement materializes, the markets won't draw anything from that sector either.
Yeah, they have not had much encouragement in that. We've had some business in corn and wheat and soybeans, a slow week, really slow week for grain sorghum, but overall some business. But each one of those commodities is running appreciably behind the rates needed to meet the actual shipment goals the USDA has put out in their supply-demand balance sheet projections for this year. If we don't see a pickup in that, then, the repercussions are higher ending stocks we're counting on right now and some bearishness. When will that all play out? Well, it'll be in that July-August time frame, right when come to the end of this market year and have to make judgments for where we're going in the next one.
Well, we will see what the USDA does have to say in the form of those reports on prospective plantings and on grain stocks. Those due out later on this morning. Dan, thanks for the insight. We'll talk again next week.
Thanks, Eric. Take care.
His weekly comments on the grain markets. That's Dan O'Brien. He is a grain market economist with K-State Research and Extension. And we'll have more in just a few moments on this Agriculture Today.
What is radon? Home exposure to radon gas is the leading cause of lung cancer death in the United States for non-smokers. In Kansas, 1 in 4 homes will test at or above the EPA action level. The Surgeon General recommends all homes be tested and fixed if necessary. Visit kansasradonprogram.org for more information. Test, fix, save a life. This message brought to you by the Kansas Radon Program, the Kansas Association of Broadcasters, and this station.
This is Agriculture Today. I'm Britton Rucker, K-State Extension Specialist, area agronomist, and counties and/or districts are again seeking to collaborate with producers in establishing on-farm and large-scale research plots in 2019. Speaking more on this topic is cropping system specialist from K-State Research and Extension, Ignacio Ciampitti. Now, Ignacio, I know last year you had on-farm projects in diverse areas all around Kansas, setting up tests involving primarily corn and soybeans, with a few studies of sorghum on the side as well. What is the goal of these on-farm research collaborative projects?
Well, thanks again for the invitation. So, I think that one of the most relevant goals of the on-farm research is to take all the pieces of information that we, as researchers, work at K-State and trying to connect that research with farmers. And specifically, I think that the end goal is to really work with farmers, discuss ideas, trying to get questions from them, and then trying to provide real-time solutions. And I think that one of the challenges that we face as researchers at K-State is that we work in small plots. We try to investigate specific topics, like, for example, seeing rates in corn. And then when you're trying to get this information, the outcomes of the research to the farm, there are some separation, and many times farmers are looking for data or information that is relevant to their specific operation. And many farmers are feeling the need to get some answers, and I think that this is one of the ways that they can get a real good true collaboration between K-State and farmers.
And this project is a farmer-run research base, correct?
Yeah, exactly. The concept is basically corn, soybeans, sorghum, you name the crop. The idea is basically to sit down with the farmers and to discuss what are their needs. And based on their needs is to establish the question. We don't want to just to go to a farmer and ask the research that we would like to investigate. We want to sit down with the farmers and ask what is the most relevant piece of information that they're missing today. Based on that information, based on the questions coming from them, we would like to establish a protocol. And what we help farmers is specifically to make sure that whenever they have a question, we can test on-farm in their fields ways to answer that question. And then I think at the end of the day is a project that is non-biased because we are not selling anything. We are just seeking the idea of helping those farmers. It's a research base because all the studies that we implemented, they have some kind of a randomization, basically. All the plots are randomized, and we have replications, so we have plots that are replicated. And then the goal is that the question specifically, as I mentioned before, is coming from the grower. So it's really grower-driven. It's not something that is a university was establishing a protocol and we are replicating the protocol in many locations. In fact, last year we had multiple on-farm research studies that they were specifically to questions that they were coming from those farmers.
Right, and that's why you're encouraging producers to really get involved with this program.
Yeah, we would like to see more producers that they have questions, that they really are seeking for answers, and our main goal is specifically, even if they have questions that they seem too simple, there is nothing too simple for us in terms of when these farmers are taking decisions. Even if it's about seeding rates or row spacing or how many plants or what is basically even input utilization if you're looking at fertilizers or fungicide applications. So we're always looking for making sure that we can provide a protocol and test that protocol, that kind of a research on their farms.
Now turning over to research data, small plots versus large plots or on-farm data, what is the main difference between these scenarios?
If you look at small plots, as a researcher, when you're looking at our type of research, we are working on very small, tiny plots. We try to control most of the factors to make sure that we investigate the treatment or the effect that we would like to test. In a large plot, many times that doesn't happen. So you have several feeds in a farmer field, and you are dealing with variability, you are dealing with topography in the field, you are dealing with so many different factors. So I think that the main concept of the small plot is good for control conditions, for small research. But when you look at the idea of the on-farm, the on-farming means that we are really testing the practices, including all the variability. We want to see the influence of the field variability into that. And if you look at the on-farm research, for me, is kind of a real farming conditions, while in the other one, small plots, is more controlled conditions.
So the farmers really do have a hand in determining what you guys are researching.
Yeah, the farmers are the ones basically deciding that. Okay. So that's the beauty of the project. The project basically is like we sit down with the farmer, and if he has a question about, I'm not sure if I'm working on the right seed rate, should I cut back on seeds or should I add more seeds? So we try to look at the seed rate that the farmer is working today and trying to, rather than just to look at the effect of seed rate on the crop, we are looking at trying to optimize seed rate. So we are working around that value of what is the optimal seed rate. Just to give you an example, on a small research, if I'm looking at trying to investigate the effect of seed rate in corn, I will probably look at 5 or 6 seed rates, and I will look at 18,000, maybe 22,000, 30,000. So I will look at really different seed rates. When you're working on an on-farm research, working with farmers, the 18 and maybe the 36 is extreme for him. He probably is not even interested in those. Mm-hmm. So he's working maybe on 24. So his question is only just, is it 24? Is it optimal or not? And then if not, the question is it probably 22 or 26? And then we try to basically, if you want, tailor all the treatments based on optimal for that farmer.
And they really are site and farmer specific.
Yeah, just give you an example. A farmer in central Kansas that, the target yield potential in corn is 150 bushel might not be the same that a farmer in northeast Kansas that his target yield potential for corn is 250. So when you're looking at a potential protocol for those two is quite different. One guy will be more aggressive, looking at improving and increasing seed rates and testing how much he can push And the other farmer might be more conservative on how he can probably test maybe a lower seeding rate to see if he can maintain the yields and save some money.
Now, how many factors need to be evaluated in this program?
In many situations, we're trying always keep it simple. My experience in the past is sometimes we evaluate 2 factors at a time at the most. For example, with several farmers, we were evaluating seeding rate and fertilization. For example, nitrogen fertilization in corn. If you ask me, most likely, I like the idea of keeping it simple and many times keeping it with 1 factor. And then last year, we were testing seeding rate, row spacing, hybrid selection. So in many situations, if a farmer has potentially 2 or 3 questions, we try to evaluate this as an individual studies in different places, in different fields. My main goal is to make sure that the farmers feel that at the end of the project that they are getting some information that is very valuable for them.
Now, how many levels are there for each factor?
In many situations, for example, if we are talking about seeding rates, we try probably to look at what is optimal for the farmer today. So if I'm discussing with a farmer and if that person is telling me, okay, today I'm using around 24,000 seeds per acre, so our goal is probably to test 1 below and 1 above. I mean, trying to keep it around the same number because at the beginning, our main question is the 24 the optimal or maybe it will be a little bit below or a little bit above? And unless the farmer has really burning questions on really seeing what happens if you go too low or too high, we try to keep it with 3 levels or 4 levels at the most if we are working on another effect. So 4 or 5 levels of treatments, in some cases it's only 3 levels. Our recommendations is usually, again, to keep it simple.
In addition, these on-farm studies in 2017 and 2018 evaluated new technology and added precision agriculture tools to the evaluation of variability and zone management. How have you seen that grow and effect that has on these studies?
Well, in fact, to be honest, we are seeing an increase in demand. In many situations, we are seeing farmers asking us about satellite, trying to get some satellite data from many fields. And yes, we are very open and willing to help those farmers to get satellite information. Many times, if you look at satellite data early in the season or maybe by mid-season, you might be able to detect some areas of the field that they are not performing well, like they are very poor performing, and basically compare with another areas that are really outperforming the rest. And this can give some information to the farmers in terms of when they are taking in-season decisions about where are the areas that you need to invest resources. If you think about that, in many situations, our experience is telling us that in the poor performing areas, investing more resources in many situations doesn't pay off. In best performing areas, investing in resources in those areas, usually those are the areas that you can get some benefits. And one of the things, just to emphasize the point, is a grower-driven, is a basically non-biased, and is a research-based. And our goal is basically to get some information to the farmers. And the idea is to make sure that the farmers understand that many of the recommendations and practices are site-specific, that they change with the farmer. So in some fields, the same practice will not produce the same benefit than in other fields. So we are here basically to help, and then we are looking for those champions that really wants to test new technologies and want to test new practices. So,
well, this project seems like a great opportunity to get involved with some cutting-edge research and to really benefit your operation. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation.
Ignacio Ciampitti, Cropping Systems Specialist for K-State Research and Extension. And if you are a producer that is interested in participating in this project, access the form at KSU On-Farm Project at agronomy.ksu.edu. For Agriculture Today, I'm Britton Rucker, and we'll be back with more after this break over the K-State Radio Network.
While many people know hunger is an issue in developing countries, it is also a problem in our own backyards. In 2010, 1 in 7 Kansans struggled to put adequate food on the table. 2 K-State Research and Extension programs are tackling this problem. The Family Nutrition Program and Expanded Food and Nutrition Education Program reach thousands of Kansans in more than 70 counties. They learn how to eat healthy with a low budget. For more information about these programs, visit ksre.ksu.edu.
Welcome back to Agriculture Today. Well, it's a universal interest throughout Kansas agriculture, that is, the state of agricultural land values. It will be the subject of a special outreach effort put on by the Agricultural Economics Department at K-State the first day of May. It'll be conducted via webinar, and it'll be guided by our guest now, agricultural economist Mykel Taylor of K-State Research and Extension. Mykel, this is an annual event, as it turns out. You make the effort, along with colleagues, to share the latest trends in land values in Kansas, right?
That is correct. What we're doing is tracking the market and trying to see what sales have done across the state and looking at statewide numbers for pasture, for cropland, and for irrigated cropland.
Just to remind folks how you've come upon this information. We visited about it before, but this report is quite comprehensive in its analysis of those trends, right?
Right. So we have to remember that Kansas is a non-disclosure state, which means that you and I can't just go find out what ground is selling for very easily. So what this is the Property Valuation Department in Topeka, through a collaboration with the Kansas Society of Farm Managers and Rural Appraisers, has allowed us to use sales data collected at the county level to look at the market across all kinds of sales, auctions, private treaty, so forth. Putting that into a statistical model allows us to kick out estimates of what the land values are at the county level.
And you have numbers for 2018 in hand, correct?
Correct. We will be comparing 2018 to the previous 4 years, getting a sense of what's happened over a relatively interesting time period where commodity prices have fallen off and land values have followed to a certain extent. And so we're going to wait and see how 2018 shakes out relative to 2017 in terms of sales and values.
And your purpose in conducting this webinar then is to enlighten interested parties on these trends, how we've gotten to this point.
Yes, exactly. I mean, we want to take into account what's been going on in the farm economy. So we're going to talk about that real briefly, and then we'll talk about, where sales have gone and what we're looking at in terms of what 2019 might hold.
For whom is this designed?
It's really designed for anybody that owns land, anybody that's looking to buy or sell ground, lenders, anybody that has an investment in land.
Yeah. And because it is in a webinar format, there's the opportunity for interaction, participants, and presenters.
Right. If you tune into the live webinar, then I'll talk for about a half an hour and then open it up to questions, and we'll do a Q&A for about another 20-25 minutes. And sometimes that's more interesting than listening to me talk. So it gives us a chance to hear what everybody's got on their mind. But we will also record the entire session. So if you don't tune in for the live webinar, then there will be the opportunity to listen to it recorded.
But there are slots available to be part of the live webinar, which we'll talk of. Want to stress once again, as we did the last time we talked about this, what you're presenting are not the absolute numbers as far as the value of a parcel of land in a given part of Kansas, right?
Right. These are county average land values. So what it is if you take a typical piece of ground that's sold in that county that would be all non-irrigated cropland or all pasture or all irrigated cropland, what would it sell for? And so it's kind of a hypothetical, but it gives us a real sense of what the market's doing.
All right. How does one participate directly in the live webinar?
You want to go to agmanager.info and sign up. Right off the homepage, there's a link to signing up for the webinar. We've got 300 slots available. They are filling up, so you want to get there and get registered as soon as possible. And then we will send you a reminder email once you're registered so that you know how to link into the webinar.
Is there a cost involved in participating then?
Well, there's not. This has historically been sponsored by some of our good sponsors, and I'm sure that will happen again.
Again, the date is May the 1st. This is scheduled for mid-morning with the Q&A toward the latter part of the session. But again, Mykel, right after the session itself, you say this will be posted online for folks to view at their leisure then.
Yes, yeah, we will record the session, post it on agmanager.info, and that will allow people to tune in to listen to it at any point in time after the May 1st recording.
Once more, though, if you'd like to be part of the interaction, the give and take, discussing the report on land values in Kansas, be part of the webinar. And to find out how to go about that, simply go to agmanager.info to enroll. The best of luck with this, Mykel. Thank you for
Thank
the quick
you.
look ahead to this Kansas Agricultural Land Values webinar. Again, 10 o'clock on the morning of May the 1st. That is a Wednesday, coming out of the Agricultural Economics Department at K-State. It'll be hosted by our guest here, Mykel Taylor, agricultural economist, K-State Research and Extension. Next up, this week's Kansas Wheat Scoop. Here's Marcia Boswell.
The National Wheat Foundation is currently accepting grower enrollment for the 2019 National Wheat Yield Contest. The contest is divided into two primary competition categories, winter wheat and spring wheat, and two subcategories, dryland and irrigated. The deadline for winter wheat entries is May 15th. According to National Wheat Foundation Board President and Idaho wheat grower Wayne Hurst, 2019 will be the first year that we truly see how a quality component will impact the rankings of growers and influence results. In order to be considered for a national or state award in this contest, growers must follow up each initial contest entry with a grain sample, which will be analyzed by an independent lab. To qualify, samples must meet a quality grade of 1 or 2. The National Wheat Yield Contest was held for the first time in 2016 and was well received by wheat growers across the United States. The contest offers growers the opportunity to compete with their peers across the U.S. and learn from each other innovative techniques to improve wheat productivity on their farms. Winners of the 2018 National Wheat Yield Contest were recognized at the Commodity Classic in February. Kansas winners in last year's contest in the winter wheat dryland division included Rick Horton from Leota, with a yield of 91 bushels per acre with the Plains Gold variety Langan, Tom Polly from Sedgwick with a yield of 89 bushels per acre with the Kansas Wheat Alliance variety Zenda, and Jerome Weens from Meade with a yield of 60 bushels per acre with the Westbred variety WB 4303. Kansas winners in the winter wheat irrigated division included Ken Horton from Kearney County with a yield of 111 bushels per acre with the Westbred variety WB Cedar, and Matt Horton from Kearney County with a yield of 106.5 bushels per acre with the Westbred variety WB 4269. To view the rules for the 2019 National Wheat Yield Contest and to register, visit wheatfoundation.org. And remember, the deadline for winter wheat entries is May 15th. For Kansas Wheat, I'm Marcia Boswell.
Thanks, Marcia, and you're listening to Agriculture Today. Legal and financial concerns surround the day-to-day management of the agricultural industry. Producers, ag creditors, and USDA agencies rely on Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services. If you've received an adverse decision from the USDA or have an ag credit concern, call today, 800-321-3276, or visit us online, Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services, exploring options, generating solutions. This is Agriculture Today, and to round out this edition, our visit with Mary Knapp, climatologist, K-State Research and Extension. She brings the latest from the Weather Data Library on our Kansas agricultural weather. There were warmer temperatures and some windy conditions around Kansas this past week, Mary, providing some drying, but hardly adequate considering where our soil moisture is.
Right. If you look at our soil moisture monitors on the Kansas Mesonet webpage, you can see that there was some drying in the 2-inch and the 4-inch level, but the amount that changed was very minimal. And if you get to the deeper soils, the 8 and the 20-inch, those are still very much saturated. And again, those warm, sunny, windy days were quickly replaced by rain again. So it doesn't take much when you've got those subsoil saturated to also get that top layer wet again. And in fact, that is universally the problem that I've been hearing reported from various parts of the state, even western Kansas, even northwestern Kansas, which has been our driest region. They're saying it's too wet to get into the field, and so there's been some difficulties with that. we have seen with that drying surface some warming of the soil temperatures. And so we are seeing average soil temperatures down in south central, southeastern Kansas that are reaching that 50-degree mark. So soils are beginning to warm up if they simply dry out enough so that we can get into the field. Field work will get active really, really quickly.
By the way, and we've spoken of it earlier in the week, as a matter of fact, in a conversation with K-State's D.N. Presley, folks should really take advantage of that soil moisture tool on the Mesonet website, which gauges soil moisture at several depths, including as deep as 20 inches.
Right. The tool is located, again, at mesonet.ksu.edu. Check the menu bar to the left and drop down to agriculture, and you'll see the soil moisture and the soil temperature both linked there. And you can look at not only, again, the 2 and 4 inch, but also the 8 and 20 inch. You can look at it either as volumetric water content or percent saturation. And there's also a tool to look at how much it's changed in the last week. So that is very handy if you want to drill down to a particular location. You can find more details on that location. But again, a nice handy tool to evaluate how things are looking on a larger scale than maybe just your farm. Keep in mind that what you experience on your particular field will be dependent on what kind of cover you have on it, also what your soil type and slope might be, because that, of course, will affect the drainage and the saturation.
Have a look at that, mesonet.ksu.edu. And just for the record, the status report on moisture, the various regions around the state this past week, what did the percentages tell us?
Actually, the West was the ones that gained all of it. They were running almost an inch of rain averaged in southwestern Kansas. That ran 269% of normal. All 3 western divisions were above normal. The Northwest was the closest to normal, and that was 113% of normal. So the West got it this time. Okay. As you move to the central, it drops off, and as you move to the east, it drops even further. Southeast averaged 0.34 of an inch, which was 47% of normal. Those in the central and eastern areas were not disappointed to miss out on the heavy rains, but keep in mind that even with that relatively dry week, only the central division is running below for the year to date, and they're at 97% of normal. If you stretch it out a little bit further and go back to September, the entire state is averaging about 1.5 times what they would normally have for that time of the year. So again, everybody's well above normal for the fall into the spring season, despite a relatively dry week. And we should mention that central area that missed out on last weekend's storm got the early edge of this weekend's storms.
Yesterday.
Yeah. So places in Dickinson, Morris had well over an inch, and in fact there was one report near Harrington of over 2 inches of rain. So again, it's like a sprinkler system that's moving back and forth, and at this time it's the central area's turn at it.
Let's look at what's ahead then for the weekend. Colder temperatures rolling in, and there are a few chances of moisture, or are we done with that for the next few days?
We still have some chances of moisture tonight and into Friday. By Sunday, it should move out, and we should have some clear skies. Temperatures are not going to be as warm as they were midweek. We're looking at highs in the 50s and 60s rather than the 60s and 70s. Some reached as much as 80 degrees, so a significant cool down. Our nighttime temperatures are going to be even more noticeable. Mm-hmm. We had some nighttime lows that were up in the 50s, which really contributed to the overall warming if we look at departure from normals on temperatures. But we're going to get down below freezing in much of the state. Not going to be much of a concern because there's very little out there to be impacted by any kind of freezing temperatures. As we move into next week, we're going to be looking again more closely approaching normal temperatures, highs in the mid-50s, maybe some 60s, and then midweek, another round of precipitation.
And then, as we look further ahead, the 6 to 10-day forecast and beyond, well, moisture still laced within that outlook.
Right. As we look into that, both 6 to 10 and 8 to 14, it favors wetter than normal conditions for much of the country, and of course including Kansas. Keep in mind also that the amount that we would typically see as we start April is significantly higher than what it was as we started March. So in the Manhattan area, we should be seeing about 1/10 of an inch a day. If we're going to be above normal, that means more than 7/10 of an inch for the week. So, again, that's not going to help drying situations at all.
Yeah. It's shaping up to be an interesting spring, let's put it that way. Enjoy your weekend, Mary. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
Mary Knapp is along with us each Friday to talk Kansas agricultural weather, climatologist with K-State Research and Extension. Thanks to you as well for joining us, and do enjoy your weekend likewise. For Britton Rucker, Eric Atkinson here. This has been Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.